So, once again, we are back on the Ideamarket Podcast. We are joined by Mike Elias, CEO of Ideamarket, and we are joined by Kevin Owocki, the founder and I believe CEO of Gitcoin, and currently sort of extremely into the NFT space on Twitter, it seems.
Totally.
I think I'm right in thinking that.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So we have a little question, which isn't the stereotypical introduce yourself. If, Kevin, you were to develop a course, like a study course,
or like a boot camp,
the purpose of which is to train or teach the person taking it to become as unlike you as possible, what would that course include? What would it look like?
Yeah, just make sure I understood the question. To make them as unlike me or as like me?
Oh no, as like you, as alike you.
Okay. Oh man,
like how would you clone yourself from people who are already born?
How would you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would just download everything I know into the Matrix, and then we would just invent that like judo chop Matrix thing that they do, that Neo does. Oh man, that's a good question. I feel like I like to operate at multiple levels. I'm a coder through and through, and writing software has been a part of my identity for a really long time. And so teaching them to code, I think, would be a big part of what I do. And then from there, you've got this foundation in which like the world is your oyster. You can build digital products, you can produce really cool stuff on the internet, and I think it's all memes and mechanisms from there. Just kind of participating in internet culture, vibing with people, and then mechanisms is how we innovate. I think we're mostly known for quadratic funding, but I've been playing with some like NFT and bonding curve stuff, and I know Ideamarkets is doing some really fun mechanism stuff. So it's memes and mechanisms all the way down, and I think that those would be the coding, memes, and mechanisms would probably be the three areas that I would start. But it's hard to answer this question without sort of like acknowledging though that there's like parts of us that are outside of our professional persona, and we're all these three-dimensional humans. We only get to experience each other through these avatars, and so
that is allowed. By the way, that is allowed to bring other dimensions in. Like I got my guitar wall right here. Like
cool.
you can be your whole self.
I wish I was that cool hobby wise. I have a bunch of hacky sacks I could show you guys. Maybe I love hacky sacking.
Hacky sacking is the most like low key cool thing there is. I think you just no equipment and you look.
Yeah,
and it's harder than it looks, so you can shame new people. It's awesome.
Well, and it's a multiplayer infinite game, right? I've been doing hacky sacks at Ethereum and crypto events basically since 2019, and it's a great way to make people feel included. They're a part of a group that's playing this game, and a lot of people will say things like, "Oh, I haven't played this since high school, but I love it. I don't know why I stopped." And I'll say, "Well, we're at a hackathon. You better get to hacking."
Yeah, that is a hack.
It was a hack to get people more hacking. Yeah.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
I feel like I just stole your joke. Yeah. But and then so what happened is when Gitcoin DAO launched in May, we launched this token called Sacks, which was just a homage to Uniswap launching socks, just like fun, playful token where they took a bunch of socks and put them on a Uniswap bonding curve, and like the price of that went way up. And the same thing happened with sacks. For a little while, we tokenized these hacky sacks, and we were selling them for. I mean, we put the tokens on Uniswap, and Uniswap was selling them for between $1,000 and $20,000. So the internet is weird. We made hacky sacking, I think, more popular by putting a token on it, and that was really surprising to me.
That's awesome. I remember the day the price of Unisocks went through the roof. I will always remember that day because I think it was the day that the Uni token dropped, and that was like, where were you when? Yeah, I love the idea of hacky sacking as this sort of social hack to get people into this community feel. I'm always looking for things like that. I've never hacky sacked before, so I'll have to like get my skills up before trying this.
No, you don't need to bring any skills. You just got to bring community-oriented spirit and vibes to the hacky sack circle. Next event I see you at, I'll definitely try to get you one.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I will practice then as to embarrass myself as little as possible.
Cool.
It reminds me of, I just can't help but mention this. When I was going to college in Santa Cruz, there would be like buses between the different parts of campus and stuff, and, down to town. And if you started singing the right song, the whole bus would join you. And it was just the coolest, like most surreal thing ever. Like if you sing the Pokemon opening theme or Bohemian Rhapsody or something like that, just somehow miraculously, everyone on that bus knows it. And like it becomes this big social thing. And I feel like the hacky sack hack has a similar feel to it. Like, oh, it doesn't matter who you are, you can jump into this. And that's really, really, really useful. Like I want a catalog of these things to, ice break without freaking people out by the word icebreaker, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that inclusivity is a good feeling, and it's too bad we can't scale that in more and more places.
Yeah. Man, there's so much I want to ask you, but I'm wondering. I've never really been a coder. Like, what was your journey into software development? Yeah, what was that like? Like, how did you fall into that, and why did it connect so deeply?
Yeah, well, my old man, when growing up, was a physics professor, and so first kid on the block to get a computer, and computers are just fun. You have computer games, you have AOL for IMing with girls when you're in middle school, and yes, very
We
key
were
use
just talking
case.
about that. That's how I met my wife.
Yeah, oh, via IM?
Yeah, AOL Instant Messenger. It's a long story.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, and I used to have like LAN parties with my friends in the neighborhood. We used to play StarCraft 1 or like Warcraft 2 over the LAN. That was always pretty fun to do that stuff. But around the time when I was 14 and I like wanted to make money to buy a car and start earning money, um, I had this job that I got at a cashier. I was a cashier at a supermarket, and I hated it so much. I just like used to watch the clock, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. But I wanted to earn money for a car, so I had to clock more hours. And what I eventually got hooked into is that my friend Mike, this guy I used to do LAN parties with, was like, "I'm going to start a company online." And I was like, kind of like, "Oh, that's weird." We were just like hanging out after a LAN party one day, and he was showing me what he was doing. He was running a web hosting company, and he would just rent servers for like $60 a month, and then he would sell a bunch of space on it. He would like virtualize it, and we would and I eventually got cut in on this. I built my own like web hosting company, and there were and so long story short, I was making more money off of doing computer stuff than I was off of my shitty like supermarket job. And it just really taught me the power of, oh wow, there's this whole blue ocean out on the internet, and where if you're like a hacker, you can kind of write your own ticket. And so I got a computer science degree just because I thought computers were interesting, and I really loved programming. Like I have this like logical mind for programming. And when I graduated from school, they ushered me into corporate America, and I again hated it so much. Just like going from hanging out with all your friends on campus to being at like you find yourself on like Tuesday morning at like 8:30 at the water cooler with some like 50-year-old lady who's talking about her kid's soccer practice, and I was just like wanted to commit seppuku. And so at that time I started hacking with the Facebook platform, which had just come out, and I built these like these flash game web like apps where you could like play beer pong on your friend's wall. It was a pretty stupid use case, but like it went viral. And again, I started making more money off like the internet through like a hack than I did at my corporate job. And I was like, oh, I should probably quit my corporate job. And so I did. And I went through Techstars. I got I somehow worked my way into going through Techstars, which is like a startup boot camp. And I've just been doing startups ever since. And it's just been a lot of fun to as the internet, as software has eaten the world, there's a lot more opportunities to hack and to create more impact on the world with software skills. So I feel like I made the right bet when I was 14 and I started getting into programming. Like, totally lucky and fell ass backwards into it. But we're also privileged and lucky to have software skills and be working in this industry that could rewrite the financial system and hopefully make it better if we do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of rewriting the financial system, if I remember correctly, you used to have in your Twitter bio or some other place the phrase "wannabe philosopher king." Do I remember that accurately?
Yeah, that was in there for a bit. Yeah.
All right. So I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I have to know, like, I of course am a big fan of building philosophy into the financial infrastructure of the future. And I can maybe guess, given your quadratic funding commitments and coordination memes, at some elements of your philosophy, but I would love to get your take on what exactly you're trying to build into the future, what philosophies you're trying to propagate, and where your heart is with all that.
Totally. Well, I just want to say that, like, I'm happy to explore this design space, but just know that it's all a LARP, right? So, like, when I say I'm a wannabe philosopher king, it's really to play with this idea that, like Plato's idea that, like, a ruler who has a love of wisdom and intelligence and living a simple life and like, I like that idea a lot, but like, I would never call myself a philosopher king. I think a wannabe philosopher king is like a fun way to like LARP a little bit at it. And like, just contrast that vision with the people who have power in politics today. To me, is like a fun little like mental, I don't know, fortune cookie or something. But anyway, I would say that my like, I studied computer science in school, but I also got a philosophy minor, and I've just kind of like tried to explore, a lot of that stuff throughout the years. It's like a nice complement to a software engineer skills to have like a breadth of knowledge about all this stuff. But I would say that I think that Ethereum and blockchain companies protocols are very cyberpunk, which I understand to be about a declaration of independence of cyberspace and a place that is independent of nation state governments and basically like freedom for punks, freedom to encrypt, freedom to live in private. And I think those ideas are really interesting, and I understand and try to grok and swim those waters. But my deepest philosophy, I think, is not cypherpunk. I think it's solarpunk, which is this vision of the future in which humanity has solved its contemporary challenges with an emphasis on sustainability problems like climate change and pollution. And so there's this art movement that has all these different pieces of art that discuss solar punk philosophy, which is like an integration of nature and technology in solving of sustainability. And I think that for me, like, you hear me focus on open source software being a public good in a lot of ways, but like one of my hopes is that if we can solve open source software, we can unleash a mountain of software engineers that are working on public goods. They all quit their jobs at JP Morgan and work for public goods. And what if we could solve problems with misinformation and with climate change and pollution and stuff like that, because we've got this tidal wave of software engineers that are working on public goods. And so Ethereum is solar punk to me, and I find those ideas to be really inspiring. Not that I don't find cypherpunk stuff to be somewhat inspiring, but I feel like cypherpunk is too stated in the negative of like wanting to fight nation state governments. And for me, like, the nation state is good when it's supporting the public good, and it's bad when it's like got fraud and is like coercive and is going to war. And like, what we really want to do is create mechanisms that support the public good that are based in blockchain based networks. And to me, that's solar punk, and that's like kind of the waters that I'm trying to explore right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the dichotomy there between cyberpunk as this sort of like stick it to the man negative kind of necessity, and that it sounds like from what you're describing solarpunk, it's a very aspirational sort of future. It's like the good version of Black Mirror. It's White Mirror. This is what we could do. This is how things could be. And
Yeah, with shades of gray, like there are parts of the cypherpunk philosophy that I think are very positive, like especially on
Sure.
privacy and encryption, and like I'm glad that it's for that. But every time I look at cyberpunk art, it's always like dark and dystopian. It feels like Batman's Gotham, as opposed to like a solar punk utopia. Just like the imagery is very different.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I love all the nature that is brought into solar punk visions.
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing visions of the future that have a lot of green, that have a lot of grass.
Yeah. Well, Mother Nature is the OG inventor. Like biomimicry works for a reason. It's because nature tried like through brute force all these different mechanisms, and the ones that have survived, these like just like fractal patterns of growth, are the ones that have staying power just through like evolution and natural selection. So I think biomimicry is inspiring on that level, but also just like when you go to the forest and you breathe clean air, you feel fucking great because that's where we evolved, as like as humans. And so there's like two levels through which I think it feels really great to explore that kind of green, that natural ethos.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is Gitcoin, is this the sort of foundation that you built to basically spread these ideas, to be the hub for this future?
Oh man, if I was that forward thinking, then I think that the answer is honestly, I didn't start out that way. I started out building 7 different blockchain side projects, and like Gitcoin was the 7th and the one that didn't fail. So it started off with wanting to solve open source, which is like, in my time leading technology teams, I'd realized how big and powerful open source was and how freaking shitty it was that people had to work nights and weekends on open source. And so like I knew that, but it was like kind of only the tip of the sphere. It was only when I heard Vitalik talk about public goods, which like open source software is a public good, but there are many other public goods that are really valuable. And then then I got like more into the solar punk and sort of that level of depth. But what's been nice about Gitcoin is that I do feel like the mechanisms that we're building and that we're proving out have given me more confidence that these problems are actually solvable with the Internet of Money. Like go to gitcoin.co/results, $35 million we've created for open source software developers. In the old world, people were like, don't even fucking bother. Like you're never going to be able to pay for open source. There's no business model for it. So it's the traction in that has made me more, I think, assertive in embracing this philosophy, and hopefully it'll continue to cycle together. But it was kind of a happy accident. It was not something I planned, to actually answer your question.
Is there a predominant place this money is coming from? Just to yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that Gitcoin is a double-sided market that connects open source software developers to the people who want access to their skills, and then gives Gitcoins, like you get coins if you have software skills on Gitcoin. And so basically, where the money comes from is like people who want to sponsor hackathons and engage with the developers there. And then also grants are like, we're going to just finish grants round 11. We're going to do $2 million for Ethereum ecosystem projects. And that money comes half from the crowd, half from people who want to give $1 or $2 to show their appreciation, and then half from this matching pool that we've raised from rounds 1 to 7 were the Ethereum Foundation. And then round 8, Andre from Yearn was like, yo, Gitcoin is great. I'm giving 150K. And then at the time, Andre and Yearn were like the coolest thing on the planet. So like everyone else started giving money to the matching pool then. So rounds 8 through 10 were like DeFi protocols. And then round 11, we launched an NFT called Moonshot Bots that raised $2 million for the public goods matching pool. So we're starting to figure out how to engineer raising money for public goods using crypto. It has been like the latest development there. But the answer is like, James, my secret is that everyone wants software developers, and I'm just like kind of good at inspiring and like aggregating software developers and on Gitcoin and through Gitcoin's brand. It's like a shelling point for developers.
But I mean, it's just an interesting idea of obviously the question of why people feel compelled to give this money, but it almost seems like an anti-tax.
Yeah,
right? It's like taxes are going towards nothing useful, so we're actually going to voluntarily put our money towards things which we know are going to benefit us in the long run. For instance, like eventually Gitcoin might help, as you say, not so much undermine, but change the financial system to benefit those who are actually paying into it.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps a heated question would be like, do you foresee places like Gitcoin potentially getting some flack because they have the potential to, shut down these big centralized systems, or at least prove a better alternative?
I think that innovation is messy, and it's almost never the story that you see in like the social network when it hits the Hollywood big screens. And so, so far, I feel embraced by nothing but love by the Ethereum community and the open source community. Actually, the open source community is, some of them think that all blockchain projects are scams and that you should stay all away. And like, so in that sense, we've gotten flack. But yeah, I don't know, change is messy, and we'll see what happens. I think that open source software creates $500 billion per year in economic value, and Gitcoin's doing like $15 million a year in rewards. So like, find me when we were doing one or two more orders of magnitude of growth, and I'll probably have some more story, so a story to tell you on that one.
One of the things, like you mentioned, that Gitcoin didn't necessarily start out as a way to like build toward the solar punk future, right? It just kind of happened to line up that way, in the sense of unlocking, solving open source funding. Correct me if I heard that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like my building skills and my philosophical skills, it feels like they're just like meandering when I look at it, but I don't know, they're probably correlated in some way that I'm exploring these idea spaces together. So it's like I feel like they're chicken and the egg, I don't know which one came first, but they're definitely there together.
Got it. Yeah, I'm hearing that sentiment a lot. That just do what you're interested in and really genuinely like, and then they'll eventually like converge and reinforce each other and like have some fit.
Yeah,
and that definitely was the case for me.
It's hard when you're climbing the wrong hill and you're climbing the wrong hill. It's hard. When I was in corporate America and I was like, I know I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, but I'm afraid to make a change. It was really jarring, and I made a weighted pro con list of quitting my corporate job and going into startups, and I almost didn't do it. I almost didn't do it. And like, that counterfactual Kevin that's sitting in a cubicle somewhere is probably fucking miserable. So it's hard to get off that when you're climbing the wrong hill, to recognize that and to start descending and going towards that global maxima.
Yeah. 100%. I wanted to just free associate a little bit on the problem of open source and why I agree with you that I think solving it is a big deal. That I was talking to, when I was working for my previous employer, who was building a really cool trading interface, a 3D trading interface. I was at a conference and I was talking to an investor, potential investor, and I'm not going to name names, but he's prominent name that people know. And he said, this is really cool. This should be a whole industry. Just figure out how to own these users, And that's kind of a Web 2 ethos, but also it's kind of the antithesis of open source. Like, in a way, if you're what the public goods, the software-based public goods that get built are an escape from the sort of the idea that you have to be rapacious first. You have to be rapacious in order to get funded. You have to kind of have this sort of
rapacious means greedy. I just Googled it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
It means greedy. It means grabby kind of. I think literally the Latin is like to grab.
Cool.
And the idea, like, I haven't quite gotten this out yet. Public goods do so much good, but generally, in order to get things funded, you have to be rapacious first. There's like a prerequisite. You have to sell things on this sort of, this will profit you basis. And if you can figure out how to unlock funding for projects that don't meet that criterion, it opens up this big bottleneck and allows people to build things that otherwise might not be fundable in that traditional model.
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, like, a few things that come to mind for me when you talk about that is that, like, we would all be better off in a world in which things were just forkable. Like, I could leave Facebook and just like fork it and create a better network. And A lot of these Web 2 companies are avoiding creating that world because they want to have a moat where users can't leave them. There's actually a playbook for this. Chris Dixon has an article about how these networks will start off working really hard to attract users to them. And like Uber, for example, has worked really hard in the beginning to attract drivers with very great rates and attract users with great deals. And then they hit this network effect where every driver that joins Uber makes it better for every user, and every user that joins Uber makes it better for every driver because there's more inventory on both sides of the network. And so they hit this network effect. And when it starts spinning, then these companies become inevitable. And they withdraw their attempts to attract the users. And then, by then they've raised probably $30 million worth of venture capital or more. I don't know, $30 million is a lot to me, but I guess if you're in Silicon Valley, that's like a seed round or something. And then they move from attracting users to extracting from them because they want to create a 100x return for their investors. And their investors are not their users. Their investors are these like rich and the few out of Silicon Valley that get access to these deals. And so the thing that's really exciting about that for me, it just like recognizing that. And by the way, I was a Web 2 entrepreneur for like 10 years before I got into Web 3. And so I understand that game. And the thing that's really exciting to me about what you can do with crypto is that with Gitcoin, like I literally saw us heading towards this future where we're a double-sided market that connects people who want to get software developers to the people who want to pay them. And like I was really worried about being a management team that was working really hard to attract the developers. And then once we hit this network effect where we were inevitable, like that I would have investors that would be like, okay, now Kevin, like you knew this was coming. It's time to extract. And luckily, Joe Lubin invested in Gitcoin, and he's never ever had that conversation with me. And I really managed to find some value aligned investors in Paradigm after Joe was ready for us to fly the Nasdaq consensus. And so one of the things we were able to do is give the governance rights of the network to the users. And we just did a retroactive distribution of GTC to all of the devs who had been on the platform. And what I like about that is like, we're eventually going to decentralize Gitcoin, and there'll be it won't matter what Kevin Owocki thinks, but like until we get there, basically there's this closed loop where the people who have the governance rights to the network are the people on the network itself. And it's this like closed loop where no one can be extracting from them. And hopefully that'll power us to longer term growth, like even more network effects over the long term. In theory, I don't know if people are rational, which they probably aren't. And like for me, it's about closing the asymmetry between value created and value captured. The reason why public goods can't be funded is because they create so much value in the world, but since they're freely available, non-excludable, and non-rivalrous, you can't capture any of the value in them. And so what's really exciting about crypto is that it gives us a tool to close the gap between value created and value captured by, it's not exactly clear to me the mechanism through which it works, but there are a lot of crypto networks that are public good that are not focused on capturing value at all. And to me, that's really exciting.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The way I've thought of it in the past is reconciling private interest with public interest. Like people, if you figure out a way to get people paid, then it's in their own interest to contribute, and then that contribution can benefit everybody. That you can sort of take away this sort of adversarial relationship between companies and the public, or governments and the public, and kind of have everyone on the same side. The chicken and egg thing. It's instead of having chickens with leashes that yank their chicks around. I don't know how that metaphor works. But yeah, I really share and appreciate that vision. And I should definitely say that if it weren't for Gitcoin, I seriously doubt Ideamarket would have gotten off the ground at all, because
that's
Gitcoin
great.
No question. Like I've zero dev experience, and the week that Balaji retweeted the article that I wrote about Ideamarket and said some nice things about it, I was like, all right, we have to actually try this now. Like I've been trying to get people to steal it and run with it, people who know what they're doing, but it's just not happening. It's been months, so I have to do this. And I went to Gitcoin and hired freelancers with my own money and threw together a prototype, and it was the best thing ever. We met our CTO there, He's still our CTO, and he's been amazing. He's won some of the biggest bug bounties in Ethereum history, and it's all thanks to the primordial ooze of hungry Gitcoin devs.
Be careful, you might become a testimonial at some point. Mostly because
you've said that to me before. You've said that to me before, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now I especially want to do it because you called us primordial ooze, and I just think I just want to see what our marketing team would think of that metaphor.
Well, I said that at the risk of offending you, but I really think of it as a wonderful, fertile thing. Like, the chaos totally, yeah. out of which good things come from.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that feels great, man. One of the nice things about what we've done is that we survived one bear cycle, and I just meet people all the time that are like, "Hey, Gitcoin changed the course of my career in X, Y, or Z way," and that feels really special. It's those moments that make all the fucking stress, all the stress worth it. So thank you for saying that, and I hope that we can help you all in the future as Ideamarkets continues to grow.
Thank you, man. Yeah, that'd be a great pleasure. I love the I love the mission, and I love trying to figure out how to solve these things that seem to be intractable. The conflicts of interest. If I completely agree with you that if we can just remove the ceiling on open source and getting paid for it and aligning capital with the will for things to exist, like people want libraries, people want public parks and museums and all that stuff, and it's just hard to do it. And if you can take the ceiling off that, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, like, people associate those things like public parks and all that stuff with the nation state. And we're at this really interesting place where I think that citizens organizing peer-to-peer can be effective at competing with nation states for delivering public goods. And so that's like, well, I debate with Eric Voorhees a lot on Twitter because he's just like, fuck the nation states, all taxation is coercive, and public goods aren't worth it. And, or like, I don't think he says that, but like, that's what I hear when he says, when he says it. And basically my argument to him is like, no, we want public goods, but like, what if we could organize them peer to peer? Like, libertarians are very anti-state. And I think that like they're not anti-public goods, they're just anti-state. And the vehicle for delivering public goods has traditionally been the state. And so if you can disconnect in their mind that you can let public goods good, nation state bad, like instead of I think of like that evolution in a narrative is like what I'm trying to create in the space, but it's just like fucking nuance is the enemy of common understanding. And it's just like, I still haven't gotten the idea into a capsule that's like concise enough to really spread it yet. But I do think that if we can turn that corner, then we can make Ethereum just as solar punk as it is cyberpunk, and that to me would be really powerful.
Yeah, I guess this is it's like an inherent individualist capitalist aspect to the libertarian, right? Like the don't tread on me thing. Mm-hmm. They're very protective, and I guess they probably, just speaking from some of the libertarians I've spoken to over the years, they probably would see like the idea of like peer-to-peer, we're helping each other out, not in terms of some value which is going to like specifically benefit me entirely. They might see that as like, oh, is this communism? Is this encroaching on some other thing that we don't agree with? But I don't think that has to be the case, right?
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't have to be the case. The problem is that it's all bundled together in like one nation state government. And I mean, actually, I don't know. I think that people are going to innovate and explore new ways of doing this. And let me just say that Gitcoin is one project that's doing really well, trying to solve this, but like Dev Protocol, CLR Fund, Radical, doing good. I respect that there's like a bunch of us that I would call regens that are looking to create a counterweight to degens in this space. And I think the next great mechanism has not been invented yet, and it probably won't just be quadratic funding the whole way down. And there'll be a marketplace of different things that people can choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that makes Gitcoin particularly special is the community aspect. You alluded to it earlier, but it really has this wonderfully sprawling influence on the culture of Ethereum in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you guys are always in touch with the Radical Exchange guys and with Vitalik, and like, you know, trying to solve this stuff both on like the big abstract wide scale and on the little practical individual scale. How did you scale Gitcoin? Like it seems like there's like a whole empire here, and there's no way you can, you know, manage to spin all those plates yourself. So like what? Tell me that.
Yeah. Well, step 1, fall ass backwards into Joe Lubin funding you for 4 years. Step 2, build Gitcoin. No, I mean, I'm being flippant
step 3,
about
profit.
it. Yeah. No, not profit. Public goods. But I do think that, you know, like in reality, I actually like Gitcoin was like my 6th or 7th crypto project. And I tried like systematically to find a way into the space, and, was just like never felt welcome. Like people blew me off for calls, interviews went bad. I got declined for job offers in the space, and like it was just like really hard to break into the space. But as soon as I got someone who would vouch for me and put me in front of Joe, and then Joe liked me, then it was like I was in the club, and Gitcoin was cool. And there were people who were like super powerful Silicon Valley like types that like just liked me and liked Gitcoin because Joe was like, yo, this guy is going to do something. And like, you know, and like conversely, during the long bear market when they were doing like 7 rounds of restructuring, Joe never shut me down. So like now, I mean, like, I guess like now I didn't feel like it at the time, but like now I guess I'm an insider in the Ethereum ecosystem, and like I have that privilege and that access that other people don't have. But I always remember what it was like to be on the outside of that and to not be, you know, known or to even be welcomed in like the space. And like I think that there's a couple different communities that have done a really good job of making outsiders feel more welcome. ETH Global is number 1, and like, by the way, Gitcoin sells hackathons and we compete with ETH Global, but like, yo, respect to ETH Global for making everyone feel welcome at these events. Metacartel is like a lot of like the first where people hang out and vibe and like make friends in the space, and then they find their position, you know, what they want to do next through Metacartel and that culture. And crypto Twitter to some extent, but you know, when you're on social media, there's this perverse incentive to build a brand and to meme and like pick fights and stuff. So I do think creating more inclusive environments for people to find their space in the space is something that I'm really passionate about. And I'm kind of proud that like Gitcoin has done, we don't do it great, but like, you know, with Gitcoin grants, like I've seen multiple people that were like, felt like their work was validated in the space because they were able to raise like 50K on Gitcoin grants through 3 or 4 rounds. And so that feels good to be building that onboarding funnel. But I forget what question you asked me, but that's how I got into the space.
Sure. Yeah, no, I was really asking about the fact that Gitcoin has a really broad scope, it seems, at this point. There's lots of sub-projects, there's kernel, there's grants, there's so much going on.
Totally. Well, you know, I think it's because so we started off with Gitcoin launched as a bounty platform where like if you do X, you can get Y. And then we launched an NFT called Kudos, which like we were super early on NFTs. Then we launched Gitcoin grants, and I actually hired Austin Griffith for like 6 months and there's something called Gitcoin Labs that he ran. And like, he still has a lot of work that was pioneering in like meta transactions and counterfactual instantiation, like shit that's still innovative today. He was doing in 2018 just because like, our mission was to grow and sustain open source software, and like bounties was not the way. Like it was just the first product that we launched with, and because we had like Joe Lubin backing us, we were able to just be more aggressive in exploring the design space really fast. Oh, and also I had like Joe Lubin bucks, but I also had bounties. So like anytime I had an idea, I would just throw it on a bounty, and like 50% of the time you won't get anything back or it's crap, but like 25% of the time you like discover a new market niche or launch a new product and stuff. So we just like explored extremely fast and probably built up too much tech debt. And now we're kind of shutting down what wasn't working and focusing again on grants and hackathons from there. Kernel was the brainchild of Vivek Singh, who's my co-founder at Gitcoin, and Kernel is great. And I have a ton of affinity for Kernel. It has become its own thing. It'll probably be its own DAO, a sister DAO to Gitcoin DAO one day. And I think I haven't been always good at enabling all the people around me, but I feel super proud that like Vivek was able to create Kernel at Gitcoin. That's a cool story. And I think Kernel's helping create an inclusive environment for a lot of people in the space, those who are able to get in.
Yeah, I was fortunate to be in the last Kernel cohort.
Oh, you were in the last block?
Was awesome.
Nice.
I was KB4, block 4, yeah. And it was like really cool as an understatement, because I had thought for decades basically that I don't like structured like school, like class like things, but it wasn't the structure that I didn't like. It was that I didn't feel like well aligned enough with my peers. But when I read Kernel's 10 principles, like 6 of them were in Ideamarket's DNA. I was like, all right, I got to do this. And it was awesome. It was the most, philosophically nuanced without being dry, like cohort than I could imagine. Like there was just awesome, deep stuff in there, asking all the right questions and exploring things from all the right directions, in my opinion, about the high stakes game of building infrastructure. Because like every crack in the concrete in the financial infrastructure of the future is going to be a gaping crevice in 100 years. And I think part of what we're going through right now is we're discovering the assumptions of our past, those little philosophical hairline fractures that we overlooked for convenience, are now gaping crevices that everything is falling into. And I just love the amount of care with which Kernel, both its leadership and just kind of the general ethos, examined, all of the nuance involved in building this stuff. So it was really exciting. I made lots of good friends, and I'm going to stick around as much as I can.
Totally. And I got to say that, like, so thus far I've given Vivek a lot of credit for Kernel, and he deserves a lot of credit. But Andy Thudhope deserves a lot of credit for creating all of the material. And man, I just remember hanging out at DevCon in Tokyo with Andy and Vivek. We got a house together and just nonstop philosophy, crypto philosophy. And like they basically productized that with Kernel. It's really kind of incredible. Like I was extremely privileged to be in that Airbnb with them, and they took it and productized it so it could be scaled to 250 people per quarter. Some of it, like, I want to be philosopher king. And so some of like the philosophy I find to be not very applicable. And, just like the engineer in me is like kind of pragmatic about it. And sometimes it's never applicable, but sometimes I'm like, oh, what am I ever going to do with this? And I just like stick it in my back pocket as like an intellectually interesting thing. And then like 6 months later, I'm like, oh, that matches this mental schema. Fucking Andy, he was way ahead of me on this. So anyway, this is a long shill for kernel.community for your listeners. Check it out.
Oh yeah, shill well deserved. Do you have a favorite philosopher? You mentioned a philosophy minor. Do you have like some favorites in history?
The question is like, what's your favorite band? Because it's like, I don't know, man. Am I in the mood for bluegrass or EDM?
Name as many people as you want. Just like whatever. We can go to town on this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how about I'll do one, you do one, just so that we can sort of go back and forth. So I'm going to start with maybe not like a traditional, like wouldn't be considered a philosopher in like from like an academic sense, but Richard Linklater's film Waking Life, which was a 2001 story about this person who throughout the course of the film realizes he's dreaming and then learns to wake up and control his dream through a lucid dream, was a really like interesting movie for me and got me into this whole subculture of lucid dreaming and like exploring your subconscious through dreams. And the question, am I awake right now, was just so profound on many levels. And especially the first time that I was in a dream, and there's this thing called a reality check in lucid dreaming culture. And this basically goes like this, like I'll do something like flip a light switch, and if the lights don't turn on or off, then I'm in a dream. And like you'll be in a dream and you'd say, and you do a reality check and you'd be like, I know I'm not dreaming, but I'll just do the reality check anyway. And holy shit, you're in a dream. Like your mind can like trick you into the fact that you're dreaming. And And then once you do that, you can fly, or you can go have sex, or you can go talk to Albert Einstein. And like, it just opened up a lot of like intellectual stimulation for me to see waking life. And also like, this is 2001, before the internet really took off. He was creating just a niche film for people who loved lucid dreaming, which was like a market of like probably 10,000 people. So like, respect to the creator behind that for creating that movie. So that's my first answer. How about you?
Well, I want to answer, but that was an awesome answer. I want to dive a little deeper there, because I've always been drawn to lucid dreaming as a thing. I've done it by accident a couple times. But were you in that tiny niche in 2001? Have you been doing this a long time?
I discovered Waking Life, the movie, in 2002 when, just like a friend I was over at their house and we watched it, and it was just unlike any other movie that I'd ever seen before. It just wasn't Hollywoodized. And I spent like 2 or 3 years being really into that culture, but then I eventually just kind of like lost it and didn't get as deep in. And now I have a lucid dream like once a month, but just knowing that it's out there and that it's possible was like, I remember the first time I put an Oculus Quest on my head, and I was like, whoa, it really tricks your body into thinking that your mind into thinking your body's somewhere else. And like, I feel like I discovered that like 20 years early when I learned about lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Also helped me work through some like emotional stress that I was going through at the time. And, learning to work with your subconscious is sometimes good for that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love the idea of lucid dreaming because it seems like there's a possibility to unlock a lot more basically waking time. Like, I've heard of martial arts masters who will just practice their kicks in lucid dreams and just have that much more time over their enemies practicing. And I just kind of love that concept that we have access to resources that are not normal. Go ahead.
So that is true. And I agree with that. Yes. But I've been someone who's been like into productivity hacks and like shit for a long time. And like, I would just say that like, yes, unlocking more waking time is good, but like, we're not all here to just like build the startup of you and to be like hustling all of during our waking hours and now even in our dreams. Like, it's about exploring frontiers and being intellectually curious and like following ideas. Or what is the line from Waking Life? It's like, it's engage with your thoughts and ideas physically as though they're physically personified. Like, I just don't want people to think it's like another productivity hack. So now you can be working 15 hours a day instead of 12 hours a day. Cause like, that's not the point of it,
Totally. And that's why I think you have exactly the right priorities to fly, have sex, and then coffee with Albert Einstein. I think that's exactly the right, instinct.
Yeah, no, those are just the first things that everyone does. Cause it's like, what would you do if there were no boundaries? But like, you can get into weirder shit. Like, in the movie, they talk about training yourself to see in all directions at once, like 360 degrees at once, which to me is just like, I would have never even thought of that because, I'm like in Plato's cave. Like, I didn't even know that was possible. Like, engaging with like dead relatives and like your ideas as if they're physically personified is like kind of gets into like trippier, weirder stuff. And then there's exploring the universe, like flying from solar system to solar system. These are like the more boundary pushing things, but like, yeah, having sex is just the first thing that people do.
Mike, you don't know this, but I was into lucid dreaming for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Kevin, did you ever get stuck in like a layered dream? Because that's what stopped me doing it ever again. Where you like, and obviously time's different, right? It's expansive, and sometimes like a day in the lucid dream or a day in a dream can feel like a month. I got stuck in like a layered dream where I kept waking up into another dream, and they were so vivid, and I was in there like months, and it was horrendous.
Really?
I was in this like dead, horrible Silent Hill type play park, and nothing scary was there, but it was like, this isn't a good place. And then I'd lay on the floor, and then I'd fall asleep in the dream, and then wake up and it would feel a little bit more like I'd woken up, but not enough. And that went on for like 20 different times, and I was like, then I finally woke up, and you do that thing where you like like feel in the room.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm not doing that again.
You must have like a different profile or something than me. Cause like I get freaked out too easy. Like I'll try to fly or be Spider-Man or something. And then I'll be like, oh shit, this is weird and freaky. And then I'll just like wake up. And, So the fact that you get trapped in a dream, I think, is the opposite of that. That's neat though, that you can hold on to it and it's that stable for you for that long.
Maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it's someone else. Who knows? I used to do that thing did you ever do the technique where, like, you know, when you're just waking up, if you imagine yourself spinning with your arms out like that,
yeah,
you get sucked back in.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've played with a couple different techniques, but I've never heard of that one.
No, that's a pretty good one. It's like really obvious to you that you're then in a dream.
Yeah. The lesson I take away from all of this kind of stuff is that we're exploring this design space in Web3 of what's possible when you have networks of computers that can transmit value across a computer network. And I think that, like, there's the obvious ideas that are skeuomorphic. The things that we recognize from our physical world or from the internet, pre-internet of money. But then there's going to be these completely novel things that we're going to discover that we could just like never ever even dream of in the old mental schema. And so a lot of it is like exploring idea spaces and being the first to realize that, oh, we can take concept X and position it in way Y, and it's actually not totally insane, even though it's never been done before. So there's this like idea of thinking abstractly and being intellectually curious and exploring design spaces that I think spans across both worlds.
I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. The design space that seems to be emerging in a certain way is, well, on one hand, there's like knowledge tech, there's epistemic tech, there's like Rome research and that whole space. And on the other, it's sort of like at a more meta level, it's like ergonomics. You mentioned the skeuomorphism of like moving the desktop metaphor onto a computer. All right, so we're taking this physical thing and putting it on a computer, but that's not necessarily how our minds want to work, which is, I think, a huge part of the Rome research insight, that it's built to kind of fit the way at least certain people's minds actually work. So we're going into like non-physical ergonomics, psychoergonomics, you might say. And that's a really exciting design space because it skips the physical world completely. It skips that proxy abstraction layer and then skeuomorphize that into digital and just goes right from here to the digital world. Is that kind of what you're saying, or is that a super?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, it's neat. We're all so privileged to be able to be exploring this. It's just, I pinch myself.
Yeah, it really is. It feels like being at the eye of a hurricane or something. Just have the whole world swirling around, and we're just like in this really sweet little spot.
Yeah,
it really does.
I think so. It's not all. Yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, I'm stressed out a lot with just trying to run a company with regulatory uncertainty, and like it's really hard to find talent right now. And like the market goes up or down 5 or 10% in a day. Like, that's all fucking shitty shit. But I think the juice is worth the squeeze. This is the kind of stuff that makes me feel like the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of talent being hard to find, I have some hires to make, and the first stop I'm going to make is Gitcoin. I'm probably going to do that today.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, fair warning, like, I think with bounties, like, basically 50% of what you get back will be crap, and like, just don't give those people money. 25% will be good, and then if you can find 20% that's great, like, take that person and walk them off into the sunset. And that's what we've seen be successful with hiring on Gitcoin.
Yep. And that's exactly how it went from my early experience there. It was a bear market, so everyone was super underpriced, but it was that sort of spray and pray kind of a thing, shotgun approach. You hire a bunch of people, and then one of them can like really kill it, and keep that person and have them evaluate the next ones. And just as a complete noob, that worked great.
Yeah, for me, it's like speed dating. One of the things that's really hard with like traditional hiring is that you post a job description, you do a bunch of interviews, you do a bunch of reference checks, maybe you do a whiteboard interview and you like approximate what it would be like to work together, and then you wait for them to start, and then you onboard them, and then like finally you get to see what it's like to work with them. But if you can shorten that cycle time to just like, yo, I'll give you an ETH if you do this project, and like, let's see if we like working together, it just skips all the bullshit. And that's what I think that we're sort of like prototyping with Gitcoin for hiring. It doesn't always work. Like, it's fine. I can admit that even as the founder of the product. But the upside of meeting someone great is much lower than the downside of like just control the explosion of like, we're doing a project together. If it doesn't work out, I'll pay you half and we can both walk away as friends. So that's been kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the de-bullshitification I've definitely felt and enjoyed, like the removal of the intermediate steps.
I like that.
Oh yeah, it's just there's the bullshit recapture industry is so wide open right now, and I just it's so much fun to participate in that and participate in other people participating in that. Just being able to skip all the interviews and go right to like, does this work? Has been hugely helpful.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do have to run in at the top of the hour. I'm sorry for getting here late, but hopefully this was an expansive enough conversation for your audience. I don't know how long your podcasts usually are.
We usually allot 2 hours, and they tend to go between 90 minutes and that, but it's perfectly fine. Okay. I wanted to kind of cover a lot of weird ground, and I think we've definitely.
Ooh, can that be the podcast title? Covering Weird Ground with Kevin Owocki. I'm into it.
Guest choice. You got it. Covering weird ground. All right, what's the weirdest thing we haven't talked about yet?
Oh man.
Let me. Well, you live in Denver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thinks there's something weird about the airport.
That's right. That there's like an Illuminati conspiracy under the airport. I heard that, but only after I had lived here for like 6 years.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know anything about that. I guess we could speculate.
Well, it gives me a lot of hope, because if humans already have access to like UFO tech, then as soon as the public knows about that, climate change is done. It's just like boom, infinite energy.
If they just had to use it for resources. Good, that's the whole problem with Pandora's box of technology, is like, if they decide to use it for the common good, then climate change is toast. No, the weirdest ground I can think of is, okay, so in the internet, like you have like Yahoo and Google, right? So like both have the same goal of organizing the world's information. Yahoo took the library card catalog system and put it on the internet. Google made a completely new interface that no one would have ever predicted before. So like, let's play forward this blockchain trend to like 2035. Like, what's the equivalent of that with the Internet of Value? Something that will be completely obvious in retrospect and extremely useful, but will only be obvious in hindsight, that's enabled by these structures.
I didn't mean to, I wasn't looking for this, but I honestly think it's Ideamarket. I honestly think it's this model. Oh yeah. Because the big challenge right now is, how do you reconcile giving people freedom to choose their information while having a sense of responsibility for it? And that's what markets do. If you have a browser extension, for example, that shows market data about an article or about a voice or about a concept, instead of this is fake news, this is disinformation, this is misinformation, which nobody has the ability, let alone the right, to decide, then we can have this sort of curation layer that's based on risk and not, fiat declaration by some company or government. And that, I think, is really the only way forward. I think it's kind of inevitable that we will have markets for information in one way or another. And so, we kind of saw this peaking out with the GME phenomenon, or the GameStop phenomenon, where people just, people lost money just because they wanted to send a message on a platform that the institutional class would hear and couldn't ignore. They even if the message was super low res, it was just "F you Wall Street," because stock markets aren't made for expressing messages. But we're building a market that is for expressing messages. And I think it'll be used. I think the demand for that kind of solution to the misinformation and communication problem, and the sort of democratization of informed consent, requires this kind of solution. It's the only thing that seems to fulfill the important criteria on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting with blockchains. You can basically make markets out of anything. And what's interesting to me is like our money is now programmable, and so if we have specific values, we can program our values into our money and create markets that reflect value containers. And like hypercapitalism to me doesn't feel like a way of creating human flourishing. Like it feels like greed, like the psychic instantiation of greed. But when it's programmable, you can shift it in one direction or another. Like you can design it around value sets, and I think that that's a really exciting idea. And yeah, you're exploring that with idea markets, and I'm curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, thank you. I think the biggest thing I'm excited about is to see when what gets called common knowledge and public narratives and all that stuff are no longer kind of handpicked for us, when that is more democratized, when there's more of an unmediated dashboard between the public and itself to see what we really believe and value, what kind of values will emerge. It seems like most people don't really want endless wars and all kinds of awful things. And when that voice is irrepressible, I'm optimistic that it will, create extra demand and optimism and hope for the kinds of values that work in the long run instead of this kind of turbulence.
Yeah, this gets into Meditations on Moloch territory, which is this beautiful essay that was circulated in the community in 2019 about living in a dictatorless dystopia, where if we could all choose it, we would not want climate change to be a thing. But our small incremental choices add up to be this monster that is the world heating up. Or if we all could like stroke a pen and make it true, then misinformation would no longer be a thing. And we would not want nuclear proliferation, like enough bombs that could blow up the planet, and we're just like living with it. And could be that destruction could be right around the corner. And so Meditations on Moloch talks about all these coordination failures where like we're failing to coordinate to make these things not happen, are kind of like a giant monster, like a giant demon monster, Moloch, that is causing all these humans to work in ways that they're complicit in creating outcomes that they do not desire. And one of the things that I think is really cool about Ethereum is we're building a better substrate for coordination. So basically, it is all coordination, and it always has been. And now we've got a more efficient way to coordinate. We've got an immutable, transparent, programmable substrate for people to build better coordination mechanisms. And what if we can't just start chipping away at Moloch, at those coordination failures using that? But so that's the hopeful message. The sort of the hard message there is that all coordination is a choice. There can be the best coordination mechanism in the world, but if people choose to defect instead of to coordinate, then we will be more headed towards the Black Mirror than towards the solar punk world. And so it's mechanisms can only go so far. It's I think the choices that people make, and we all have to choose to steer towards that. And that's the hope and promise, but also the peril of the internet of value and the internet, I think, these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we can program money to make more publicly beneficial choices more naturally appealing, so that freedom can be aligned with that sort of collective benefit, I think is one of the most, if not the most exciting possibility that we're all kind of building inside. So I know you got to go, but thank you so much for joining us for this hour here. It's been super fun. And we'll
Thanks for joining
continue the weirdness some other time.
Thanks for having me. This is a great place to end it.